Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first session of But First Plants of the New Year. So if you remember last year, which was a couple of weeks ago, when we started this series, But First Plants, we looked at some individual plants and the history of them and kind of what we use them for and things like that. Well, this year, I'm going to do something a little bit different with this series. And we're going to start looking at what happens when we combine certain plants together. So I hope you're excited. I am. And our first blend that we're going to look at this morning is a blend of clove, lemon, cinnamon bark, eucalyptus radiata, and rosemary. So lemon, since we covered that previously with a whole session, I'm not going to go into lemon again, but you can always go back and catch the lemon session and learn all about lemon because lemon's amazing. All right, so what happens when you combine these different things? Well, let's look at them individually first and kind of learn a little bit about each one. So clove, has been used for centuries. It was one of the first spices to be traded, and it was found in vessels that date back as far as 1721 BC. So clove has been around for quite a while and highly prized. It was prized by both the ancient Romans and, of course, the Chinese, very well known there. At one point in history, clove was worth more than its weight in gold. Eugenol is clove's principal constituent, and it was used in the dental industry for years to numb gums. So, very, very well-known constituent there. The island of Tarat was free from epidemics until the 16th century when Dutch conquerors destroyed all of the clove trees. And they actually did that because they were in a trade war. The Dutch wanted to have a monopoly on all of the clove. And this is the point where clove was more expensive than its weight in gold, worth more than its weight in gold, because the Dutch were getting a monopoly on it. And it was highly prized. So that is a little bit about clove. And let's go ahead and look at cinnamon. So cinnamon dates back to about 2800 BC. So it's been known a little bit longer than clove. And it is one of the world's most important medicinal spices. Sorry, I'm having trouble reading my notes here. And it was referenced by the ancient Chinese, a guy named Pliny, and a couple of associates of his, Discordus and Theophrastus. Okay, if you speak Greek, I'm sorry, I'm sure I just butchered those. But cinnamon is actually mentioned in the Bible as part of the holy anointing oil, the formula that God gave to Moses on Mount Sinai that they used to anoint all of the holy things in the tabernacle and then the priests themselves. So, cinnamon's been around and highly prized for a while. Rome, the ancient Roman culture, they would burn cinnamon during funerals. And the Egyptians used it as part of their embalming practices. In the 15th century, it was used by the elite because, of course, it was very expensive and they were the only ones who could afford it, to mask the smell and the taste of spoiled meat, which I find interesting because cinnamon contains phenols, which inhibit bacterial growth. So there you go. They would use cinnamon on that spoiled meat. I wouldn't want to eat spoiled meat anyway, but you know, hey. That's what I learned. So, and then we'll look at Eucalyptus Radiata, and we're being specific because there are lots and lots and lots of different species of eucalyptus. Eucalyptus is a genus, and then there's tons and tons of species. So we're specifically looking at the Radiata species of eucalyptus. So this particular eucalyptus was treasured in folk medicine. It comes from Australia, I believe. And Wikipedia states that Radiata was the first eucalyptus species, of which there are many, to be commercially utilized for oil. Again, I was in a hurry when I wrote this. So it was the first eucalyptus species to be commercially utilized for oil. It's very high in eucalyptol. It's not the highest. I believe Eucalyptus globulus has the highest amount of eucalyptol, but Radiata is a very close second. And it's often used for the respiratory system and as an insect repellent. I was reading that eucalyptus trees were planted in North Africa to help control malaria, because of course the oils that the trees give off, so the vapors, are a bug repellent, and of course we all know mosquitoes carry malaria. So that was an interesting fact. All right, and then rosemary was used in 1st century, or anyway, 1st century medical writings mention rosemary as being good for improving memory. So if you've ever heard that phrase, you know, rosemary for remembrance, that has been around for a long, long time. And there were several different, remember those 3 guys I mentioned, Pliny and anyway, I can't even pronounce them. Those 3 texts that they wrote were all mentioned rosemary, and the one thing they all agreed on with rosemary was that it improves memory. So that was interesting. And in ancient Greece, rosemary was burned as incense, and it was adopted by the sick as burning it to help ward off infection, which was interesting. And until recently, French hospitals actually used rosemary to disinfect the air. So, yeah, just really cool stuff about all of these plants. And then, as I mentioned, lemon was also in the blend we're looking at today. And the only thing I'm going to mention about lemon is it is high in limonene. If you want to learn more about lemon, go ahead and look at the previous But First Plants video that was all about lemon. All right, so story time. I promised you guys stories. So today's story is actually really, really interesting. There were, back in the 15th century, in, we'll just say Europe, because I don't remember what country. I want to say France, but that could be wrong. Anyway, the plague was going on. I want to say it was the Black Plague or bubonic plague, but I don't remember. Anyway, there was this legend that these men decided to, people were sick and dying everywhere. Well, they decided to rob the sick and the dead, the dying and the dead. But they, of course, didn't want to contract the plague, because if they did, they wouldn't be able to enjoy all their spoils. So they disguised themselves as spice merchants, and they would cover themselves in spices before going in to rob the dead and the dying. Well, legend goes, eventually they got caught, and they were brought before the king. Well, the king gave them an ultimatum. Either they could be executed for their crimes, or they could give up their formula And if it worked, they would be able to serve some jail time instead of being executed. Well, the thieves thought about it, and they decided to give up their formula. Well, the king took that formula, had his people make it up and give it to his sick wife and child, or children, I'm not sure. Anyway, they recovered. And so the thieves were, their lives were spared. And so there's this legend that has been around for a long time. And it was actually this legend that inspired the research for the blend that we are discussing today. And the blend we're discussing is actually called Thieves, in honor of the legend. So Thieves is a blend of clove and lemon, cinnamon bark, Eucalyptus Radiata, and rosemary. I love this blend. Because of the clove and the cinnamon, it smells spicy and a lot like Christmas and fall. So it's a lovely oil to diffuse. In fact, we use it a lot in the winter. If you have seen my very first story time video, that one I talk about our first winter here after we discovered essential oils. And Thieves played a huge part in that story, and a huge part in why our family didn't stay ill as long as we normally do. So I love, love, love this blend and what is in it, because of when you bring these powerful constituents together, the clove, the cinnamon, the limonene, the eucalyptol, the rosemary, all of that, they work together as a very powerful immune supporter. So that is how we use it in our house. Thieves comes in both the aromatic topical, which is this one right here, and then the smaller white vitality. So I've also been known to put Thieves Vitality in the fall apple salad that I make because it tastes like fall. Or I like adding it to chamomile tea if I want kind of a spicy, warmer tea, you know, things like that. So there's lots and lots of things that you can do with the. In fact, my toothpaste is Thieves toothpaste. I use Thieves household cleaner. I use Thieves laundry soap. So I use lots and lots of Thieves in my life. I use Thieves dishwashing powder and, you know, all the things Thieves. Love it. Anyway, I hope this has been informative and you guys have really gained some knowledge about blending plants, and we'll continue as we go through this series to look at different blends and the history of what's in those blends and what they do when you combine them, because God's plants are powerful, you know, individually, and they're also very powerful when they are brought together in the proper proportions, right? It's just like cooking. You know, you don't just use one spice when you cook. You don't just use salt or pepper. You use salt, pepper, garlic, basil, oregano, you know, depending on what you're cooking, cumin and parsley and cilantro. Anyway, so depending on what you're looking for, what flavor profile, you use different spices. Well, depending on what you want your combination of plants to do, you make different blends. All right. Love you guys, and I will see you on Thursday again at 6 a.m. as we look at another blend of plants and what it does. All right. Talk to you guys later. Bye.